Before the Fellowship was the greatest story you've never heard. I'm Dan.
I'm Greg.
I'm Cameron.
Join us as we read and react to the Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien. Last time we read about Melkor's release from prison. He was in chains. He hid his evil intentions from both the Valar and the Eldar and patiently sowed division in the hearts of the Noldor. Today, we begin Chapter 7 of the Quenta Silmarillion, which is found on page 67 of the second edition. Chapter 7 of the Silmarils and the Unrest of the Noldor. In that time were made those things that afterwards were most renowned of all the works of the elves. For Feänor, being come to his full might, was filled with a new thought. Or it may be that some shadow of foreknowledge came to him of the doom that drawn near, and he pondered how the light of the trees, the glory of the blessed realm, might be preserved imperishable. Then he began a long and secret labor, and he summoned all his lore, and his power, and his subtle skill, and at the end of all he made the Silmarils. As three great jewels they were in form, but not until the end, when Feänor shall return, who perished ere the sun was made, and sits now in the halls of awaiting, and comes no more among his kin. Not until the sun passes and the moon falls shall it be known of what substance they were made. Like the crystal of diamonds it appeared, and yet was more strong than adamant, so that no violence could mar it or break it within the kingdom of Arda. Yet that crystal was to the Silmarils, but as is the body to the children of Ilúvatar, the house of its inner fire, that is within it, and yet in all parts of it, and is its life. And the inner fire of the Silmarils Feänor made of the blended light of the trees of Valinor, which lives in them yet, though the trees have long withered and shine no more. Therefore, even in the darkness of the deepest treasury, the Silmarils of their own radiance shone like the stars of Arda, and yet as they were indeed living things, they rejoiced in light and received it and gave it back in hues more marvelous than before. All who dwelt in Aman were filled with wonder and delight at the work of Feänor. And Varda hallowed the Silmarils so that thereafter no mortal flesh, nor hands unclean, nor anything of evil will might touch them, but it was scorched and withered, and Mandos foretold that the fates of Arda, earth, sea, and air lay locked within them. The heart of Feänor was fast bound to these things that he himself had made. Then Melkor lusted for the Silmarils, and the very memory of their radiance was a gnawing fire in his heart. From that time forth, inflamed by this desire, he sought ever more eagerly how he should destroy Feänor and end the friendship of the Valar and the elves. But he dissembled his purposes with cunning, and nothing of his malice could yet be seen in the semblance that he wore. Long was he at work, and slow at first, and barren was his labor. But he that sows lies in the end shall not lack of a harvest, and soon he may rest from toil indeed, while others reap and sow in his stead. Ever Melkor found some ears that would heed him, and tongues that would enlarge what they had heard, and his lies passed from friend to friend, as secrets of which the knowledge proves the teller wise. Bitterly did the Noldor atone for the folly of their open ears in the days that followed after. When he saw that many leaned towards him, Melkor would often walk among them, and amid his fair words others were woven, so subtly that many who heard them believed in recollection that they arose from their own thought. Visions he would conjure in their hearts of the mighty realms that they could have ruled at their own will, in power and freedom in the east, and then whispers went abroad that the Valar had brought the Eldar to Aman because of their jealousy, fearing that the beauty of the Quendi and the Maker's power that Ilúvatar bequeathed to them would grow too great for the Valar to govern, as the elves waxed and spread over the wide lands of the world. In those days, moreover, though the Valar knew indeed of the coming of men that were to be, the elves as yet knew naught of it, for Manwë had not revealed it to them. But Melkor spoke to them in the secret of mortal men, seeing how the silence of the Valar might be twisted to evil. Little he knew yet concerning men, for engrossed in his own thought in the music, he had paid small heed to the third theme of Ilúvatar. But now the whisper went among the elves that Manwë held them captive, so that men might come and supplant them in the kingdoms of Middle-earth. For the Valar saw that they might more easily sway this short-lived and weaker race, defrauding the elves of the inheritance of Ilúvatar. Small truth was there in this, and little have the Valar ever prevailed to sway the wills of men, but many of the Noldor believed, or half-believed, the evil words. Thus ere the Valar were aware, the peace of Valinor was poisoned. The Noldor began to murmur against them, and many became filled with pride, forgetting how much of what they had and knew came from them in gift from the Valar. Fiercest burned the new flame of desire for the freedom and wider realms in the eager heart of Feänor, and Melkor laughed in his secrecy, for to that mark his lies had been addressed, hating Feänor above all, and lusting ever for the Silmarils. But these he was not suffered to approach, for though at great feasts Feänor would wear them, blazing on his brow, at other times they were guarded close, locked in the deep chambers of his hoard in Tirion. For Feänor began to love the Silmarils with a greedy love, and grudged the sight of them to all save his father and his 7 sons. He seldom remembered now that the light within them was not his own. High princes were Feänor and Fingolfin, the elder sons of Finwë, honored by all in Aman, but now they grew proud and jealous, each of his rights and his possessions. Then Melkor set new lies abroad in Eldamar, and whispers came to Feänor that Fingolfin and his sons were plotting to usurp the leadership of Finwë and of the elder line of Feänor, and to supplant them by the leave of the Valar. For the Valar were ill-pleased that the Silmarils lay in Tirion and were not committed to their keeping. But to Fingolfin and Finfarfin it was said, "Beware, small love has the proud son of Miriel ever had for the children of Indies. Now that he has become great, and he has his father in his hand, it will not be long before he drives you forth from Tuna." And when Melkor saw that these lies were smouldering, and that pride and anger were awake among the Noldor, he spoke to them concerning weapons. And in that time the Noldor began the smithying of swords and axes and spears. Shields also they made, displaying the tokens of many houses and kindreds that vied one another, and these only they wore abroad. And of other weapons they did not speak, for each believed that he alone had received the warning. And Feanor made a secret forge, of which not even Melkor was aware. And there he tempered fell swords for himself and for his sons, and made tall helms with plumes of red. Bitterly did Matan rue the day when he taught to the husband of Nerdanel all the lore of metalwork that he had learned of Aule. Thus, with lies and evil whisperings and false counsel, Melkor kindled the hearts of the Noldor to strife, and of their quarrels came at length the end of the high days of Valinor and the evening of its ancient glory. For Feänor now began openly to speak words of rebellion against the Valar, crying out aloud that he would depart from Valinor back to the world without, and would deliver the Noldor from thraldom if they would follow him. That ends our reading. Let's do a little quick recap of what we just read. Lots of pretty cool stuff happening now. Feänor at last creates the Silmarils, the three great jewels infused with the blended light of the two trees. Blessed by Varda, they could not be touched by evil, unclean, or mortal hands. And Mandos decreed that the fate of Arda lay with the Silmarils. We see Melkor lusting after the Silmarils, and he manages to convince people with his poisonous deceptions, and they take effect on the Noldor, in whom pride, anger, and mistrust arose. And we also hear them creating weapons for the first time, or I think for the first time, and having divisions there, which I thought was cool. It looked like the golden age of the Noldor's coming to a swift end as jealousy and greed start becoming a part of them. What did you guys think?
Incredible. It's amazing. At that last part you mentioned about the day coming to an end, it does seem to be pretty literal. That I think in our previous reading, when Melkor, sues for pardon, it was at the noontime of the day of the waning of the trees. And then now it says, of their quarrels came at length the end of the high days of Valinor and the evening of its ancient glory. So it does seem to imply, at least from the reading, that the plan of Melkor took from the noontime of the age to the evening. So he was spending a long time in his whisperings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he pretty much used the tool of inception on the Noldor.
Oh yeah.
He like, I mean, that's part of his subtle cunning, right? He just says these little things, and they start to think it came from their own thoughts. They start to believe.
He doesn't give them the idea. He gives them everything they need to get to the idea.
Right. It's very deceptive and scary. Like we're all susceptible to that in a sense, and it's just one of those things that makes you question reality. Like is what I'm perceiving.
Yeah.
Truly
gaslighting.
Real. Yeah, it is.
It's interesting that the Silmarils are tied in with the, history of Middle-earth, and like the fate of Middle-earth is bound to them. Mm-hmm. But the first, like the way that Arda, or Aman, I should say, that Aman is kind of starting to unravel is because of simple deception. It's because of words. It's not because of a fight. It's because of gossip and words, implying and tearing down. Mm-hmm. I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah, did you hear how Melkor was gossiping?
Oh my gosh, he's such a gossipper. You heard him do that, didn't you, in the reading?
Tell everyone.
This book is so trashy. I don't know why we're reading this.
So going back to Feanor creating them, it's what do you think about his motives for creating them? It's in the first paragraph. And it doesn't really say what he's thinking. Like, is it aroused from fear, Or is it actually just prudence? You know, is he creating the Silmarils from a place of prudence or a place of fear? I don't know. What do you guys think?
Possibly a little of both, you know.
Yeah, it doesn't.
It's
It seems to
interesting.
give a few reasons, right, that it
Yeah.
could be.
It mentions, you know, it's one of these things that sometimes Tolkien does in this book where he kind of, because it's kind of like a history, he's just laying out, here are some possible reasons for why this thing happened, you know? So he mentions it may be that some shadow of foreknowledge came to him. But that's not even definitively said. It's just that he knew that perhaps he just knew that the trees weren't going to be there forever. And they were such a beautiful thing. It was worth trying to preserve them in some way.
And I mean, that kind of makes me think of the question: should he have created them? I mean, they didn't have cameras, so he couldn't take a picture of the trees before they died. But they probably have artists. And what's the significance of the trees? Like, when the trees die, what does that mean for the elves? Does it mean they die too, like it's implied in the Rings of Power Amazon TV show?
Oh, good question.
They're tied to the earth, but in a broader sense. Like, and this is something I don't think maybe it said it in here. Maybe we've discussed it, but I remember reading that in the one of the appendices in the Lord of the Rings that I have, where it's saying the elves are particularly tied to the earth. So in the time of the Third Age in the Lord of the Rings, that's why they're all departing and they're all kind of sad, because the world is just in decline at that point until it just fades and they fade with it. But this is still kind of like early in the world, you know? It's kind of the end of this time, the evening of this time of the Blessed Realm or whatever it is. But this is a good question. Like, should he have done this? I don't know.
Yeah.
Because these deceptions are happening regardless. That's Melkor's plan.
They're happening because he wants the Silmarils, and he wants to become powerful again, and he wants, you know, the factions to fight amongst themselves so he can rise up on top.
But it does make me wonder: are the Silmarils just like, now that they're here, he kind of, I mean, he does lust after them, yes, but he knows that they're a powerful object and there's something that he can kind of wield to carry out his purposes. Because he does really hate the elves above all things, and Feänor the most.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of both. It's kind of circular, isn't it? Like, it kind of stokes his hate for him.
But then Feänor has also a little bit of a kind of turning towards. I mean, it kind of echoes a little bit of the preciousness of the ring to Gollum, to me. I know I love echoing Gollum and Smeagol narratives in here, but he began to love the Silmarils with a greedy love and grudged the sight of them to all, save to his father and his 7 sons. So there's a beginning of something darkening in Feanor's heart. We know that he's at his like peak. He's like peak virility with his 7 children that he just pops out like that, and peak might, because it says he's being come to his full might. And it's now like, it's almost with the waxing of the elves across the land, it's now the tide is turning. Now there's a waning that's happening, and the waning is happening to the elves. It's also happening to their, like, the noontime of their day, and it's also happening to Feanor, because he's because this is the first sight that we've really seen him kind of start to get greedy, right? I don't think in the last readings we didn't receive much of his faults, did we? Or did we?
No, not really.
It was more neutral.
Bad.
He's like kind of like this wild burning fire, but it was not
He was wild,
pointed
but not
at anything
bad, I'd say.
bad. Yeah.
So we're seeing what the fire is becoming. Like, we've seen the good side of it, the powerful side of it, the life-giving side of fire. And now we're starting to see the other side of his passion.
And it's stoked by Melkor, right? And there's this line in here. It sounds like an ancient proverb or something. It says, he who sows lies in the end shall not lack of a harvest, and soon he may rest from toil indeed, while others reap and sow in his stead.
Oh wow, yeah. That when I read that, it was hard to like wrap my head around
Which page
it.
is that?
That's on top of 68.
Yeah,
And that's just the reality of these kinds of divisions that he's sowing. It's kind of what we're talking about, this inception, where all he's doing is subtly suggesting things that are taking root in the hearts of the Noldor, and then he just sits back and watches as they just bear gross fruit.
After that, it says some tongues enlarge what they have heard.
yeah.
So like the idea of sowing seeds of lies that grow and become bigger to the point where he doesn't need to sow anymore. He can rest, sit back, and watch the dissension. That's so interesting.
Yeah, that's really cool. It's really cool.
Have you heard the term information hazard? Have you heard that term before?
No.
No, but I know that the internet's the information highway. I taught that.
That's close to what it means. Yeah.
In the 90s.
Should I use the internet to find the answer?
Yeah, do it. Ask Jeeves.
I can tell you. Unless you want to
ignore.
Well, you might not want to know though. This is like one of those things that you can't unknow.
What's it called? Information hazard.
No, it's not like that. It's the idea that there's information that you can know that by knowing it, it becomes dangerous. If you didn't know it, it wouldn't be dangerous. But once you know it, you are subjected to some kind of danger.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
And that's
Like
kind
the
of
game.
what I guess. Yeah, something like the game.
Everybody lost the
Cameron,
game.
do you hate the game?
No, I win the game whenever I play it.
Because you're Eru Iluvatar, right? So you're not bound by the rules of the game. But that's kind of how.
If you think about the game, you lose the game. That's the game.
That's the game, yeah.
Okay,
information
just for people
hazard.
who don't know who are listening.
Amongst our listeners,
knows
all
the
across
game.
the world, there are people who, when you said that, Dan, were like, I just lost the game.
Yeah, but it's information hazard. It proves the point.
Right, exactly. And that's kind of what Melkor does, right? It's like false knowledge, but it's building this like dangerous thing. If they didn't have that knowledge to begin with, because part of what he's doing too, he's manipulating the Valar's silence about man and other things like that. Like if they just waited to know when they're supposed to know things or when it's revealed to them in the right time, they wouldn't be dealing with some of this stuff. But Melkor is jumping the gun and playing that to his advantage.
Yeah.
Oh, Cameron, I remember you saying when we were reading the music of the Ainur about how Melkor's music was like, he's just like banging, like annoyingly. So like, just listen to me. Like I'm making all the noise. And it's funny that it mentions he didn't even really know much about man because he was so engrossed in his own music. He kind of he wasn't paying attention to the third theme.
Bongo or whatever he's playing.
Bongo. That's like the least thing that I was imagining him playing.
He really
I
has
imagine
like a
him
full
like
set of,
you know in the movie Mad Max, the guy on the electric guitar on the back.
Oh, yeah.
I imagine it like that, just like droning, like kind of skillful but loud and just like obnoxious and terrifying.
What I imagine is that he's playing a trombone, but the wrong way. Like he's screaming into the opposite end of it or something.
What I picture is now we're going off the rails really, but he's like a taiko drummer, but he has like 40 arms and he's doing all the drums, but instead of rhythmically, it's just like he's just smashing every drum.
He just wants
Isn't
to
there a
ignore
Sesame
it,
Street character who basically is that?
Is there?
Isn't there a Sesame Street character that plays the drums? Or am I thinking Muppets?
Muppets.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, I get
and he
those
plays the drums
confused, too.
like that. It's
Yeah,
just
but
like,
he's good. Isn't he a good drummer? Or I don't remember.
I guess for a Muppet.
Pretty good for a Muppet, One thumb up.
He has trouble articulating his wrist, so he can't really drum that well.
Here's what I want to say about the Silmarils that you mentioned earlier. I don't think they're a bad thing. Like it was bad to make them because the way Tolkien describes them, it all seems good. Like I can't find a flaw. They seem like they not only contain the light of the trees, but they're more robust than the trees. Like they cannot be destroyed by any tool. in Arda. And so I don't see anything in the text that would assume that they're bad. Like the ring of power is a bad thing, like made for an evil purpose.
Yeah, and I guess my question is, they're not bad, but it's kind of like the Pandora's box thing. Like Pandora's box isn't bad in of itself, right? But the opening of it is.
Mm-hmm. But wasn't it bad for him to make something at the height of his skill that was the greatest thing that was made in the earth? You know, even if it causes people to, you know, be greedy after it.
Yeah.
And we don't know his intentions.
And if he didn't make it, then we wouldn't have a story. So
there you go.
End of the book. And he decided not to make these jewels that would have been beautiful. The end.
The end.
That reminds me of something we read last time, I think, where I think it said that the children of Indus, his brother, those are his other brothers, his half brothers, and their children and stuff. It says they were great and glorious, and if they had not lived, the history of the Eldar would have been diminished. So there is something about this where, I don't know, Tolkien's kind of suggesting, yes, there are some evil things that are associated with this, but they don't necessarily outweigh the good things. And I think that might be how it is with the Silmarils. Like, they are objectively great and beautiful, and they come from the peak of Feanor's skill. So in themselves, they are good.
Mm-hmm.
And even though bad things follow, I don't think that was the intent of, or I don't know, the way I read it, I don't think that was Feanor's intent for, but it just seemed like, you know, Mandos says the doom of the elves is tied to them forever.
G.K. Chesterton says anything worth doing is worth doing badly. Obviously, he made this, but the badly side of it is his ability to kind of be a steward over them, right? He's doing that pretty badly because now he's thinking that he is the source of the light from it. He's kind of forgetting that it doesn't come from him.
That he only adapted the light, like he didn't make the light.
Yeah. Okay, so last thing I want to talk about before we close up, and then if you guys want to talk about something instead, that's cool. The weapons. I'm excited.
I was just gonna bring that up.
I'm excited about the Secret Forge. I want to hear about that more. I hope we get to hear more about that. I don't remember if we do. But yes, what are your thoughts on the weapons?
My thought is, I wonder if this was the invention of weapons. Because so the lies were smoldering. You know, Melkor sees that there's pride and anger. And it says, he spoke to them concerning weapons. So it's almost like, hey, you know those tools you use to write and carve and craft?
Yeah, and so
what if you made a similar tool that could be used to kill or to stop or to wound or to threaten, you know? And it says the Noldor began the smithing of swords and axes and spears. So it's interesting that like maybe this moment was the invention of weapons and war.
Yeah, I think I even mentioned at the beginning, like that's the first time we hear about weapons. Am I and smithing to a larger degree?
Because I think the Valar might have weapons.
Fists.
That's true.
Wait,
that's right.
Tolkien fought with his fists.
Oh, okay.
But I do think the other Valar had weapons because they went to war with Melkor and all of his
what would
evil creatures.
When it says they went to war, does that mean they have their own smithy?
Maybe they were throwing. Well, Ali is kind of their. You know, he's like the craftsman. But
maybe it was rap battles or some kind of intellectual kind of warring.
It was like blindfolded chess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or as we learned from in the Rings of Power, maybe one of the females went and just was able to destroy a bunch of orcs and cave trolls and Melkor single-handedly with really cool flips. And because that happens in Rings of Power.
I don't know if Tolkien mentions the flips though.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, you can read between the lines.
Depending on how many flips there were.
I was wondering, well, with the weapons and stuff, you know, it's kind of funny because of how deceived they really are. they only show shields to each other. They don't ever reveal to their opponents that they have swords. But there's got to be a point where they realize, like, we have shields because we think they have weapons. And they have shields, so that must mean they think we have weapons, and we do have weapons. So they probably also have weapons, you know? But they just never really come to that.
He must have told them all separately, like, hey, there's a thing called a weapon. And then went to the other house and pulled them. Interesting.
But shields were also, like, utilized as, like, glorified badges, right?
Yes.
It's like your tartan. Right. It's like, it shows your tribal, like... Yeah. So they're like showing them off, like mine's bigger than yours, and it has like cooler like designs on it and whatnot.
Now you've gone and offended our Scottish audience by saying things and make it sound like they're savage.
Now you've offended the Irish because they do that too. So there you go, Irish.
Here's my shield.
Cameron's offended, and so
I have a shield. I'm showing to the camera.
I have a shield. Here it is. If England lose, this is bad, but that's my shield. There we go.
All right.
Cool. Great. Well, if you guys enjoyed our episode today, please don't forget to leave us 3 Silmarils out of 3 Silmarils.
It's hilarious. Finally. People understand what we mean.
Oh yeah, because yes. You now know the joke. Cameron's been waiting to reveal the joke to you, and now you can laugh.
Jokes are the ones that like are a slow burn for like weeks.
Yeah.
And then you get the punchline like 6 weeks later. 15 weeks later.
I think we said it wrong for the first couple weeks too. I kept saying like 3 Silmarillions out of 3. And...
three editions of Silmarillion out of 3. Okay, and follow us everywhere Before the Fellowship. And send any comments or questions to beforethefellowship@gmail.com. Join us next week as we read the greatest story you've never heard, The Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien.